Welcome back to the Run the Numbers podcast, folks. Now that I'm full time, I'm going to start telling you a bit about my journey and my business model and what were the experiences that led me to this point to be a crazy man online creating business media mogul. Part of that journey that I cannot skip over is the company that I tried to start with my wife. It was called Bubba Booking. And so today, I think we're going to call this the business of mostly metrics, part two. So this is the story of bubble booking. Um, it was painful. I learned a lot. It was a crazy marketplace idea that we couldn't land the plane. But at the end of the day, it's not the money that you spend, it's the experiences you get from it. And this was definitely one of those financial decisions that was so bold that it's like, are you sure this is a good idea? And even your future self will look back and be like, yikes, but also, wow. And so I did that. So I lost $209,640 of my own money trying to start a business. And that wasn't theoretical money. It wasn't monopoly money. I'm talking wedding gifts, house fund savings, paycheck deposits, all turned into startup jet fuel. And spoiler alert, it didn't end in a unicorn. It ended in my parents' basement. Just kidding. I still had enough money to live on my own, but I was living in my parents' basement when we were creating the company. Real quick though, before we dive into my public therapy session here, I do want to talk about a lever that most founders and finance leaders overlook: their tax position. And so this episode is brought to you by Gelt. You already know tax season isn't just a deadline, it's a lever. At Gelt, they work with CFOs who aren't just looking to stay compliant, they're looking to unlock strategic value from their tax position. So think optimized entity structures, real-time visibility across complex ownership, and proactive tax planning that actually moves the needle on cash flow. And here's the thing, the tax landscape, it's changing fast, especially for high growth businesses, alternative investors, and companies juggling multi-entity complexity. That's the worst. Whether it's prepping for a capital event, evaluating comp structures, or dodging costly surprises, your tax strategy should be as agile as the rest of your business. Gelt gives you quarterly strategy check-ins and proactive estimates to lower your effective tax rate, protect equity value, and drive long-term efficiency, all delivered through clear communication with your Gelt CPA in a modern, powerful platform. Get 10% off your first year by visiting go.joingelt.com/mostlymetrics. That's go.joingelt.com/mostlymetrics. It'll be in the show notes. Okay, back to me losing $209,640. I'll never forget that number. So the idea was pretty straightforward. It was a marketplace for last minute tours and activities. So think Hotel Tonight meets Open Table with some Class Pass sprinkled in. And so it's a digital fix for the pen and paper industry that existed for booking things to do. So we wanted to bring live connectivity to a part of tourism where 80% of bookings were still on clipboard and a prayer that like the jet ski would actually be there when you showed up. And so me and my wife bootstrapped the whole thing: nights, weekends, vacations, like I said, wedding money, the house fund. Eventually, we did leave our East Coast life behind and we moved to Florida. That's how I ended up in Naples. And we figured that year-round tourists were a year-round opportunity, right? Like if you're in Boston, you have 3 months basically to do anything outside that's tourist related. And we even lived with my parents to make the budget work while we were building it. And we chased the dream hard, but what we didn't realize is that there are a lot of line items that come along with that. And so here are the lessons that I learned trying to build Bubble Booking. So once again, it was a marketplace app in the tourism sector, and it was technology enabled. So the first lesson was differentiate technical risk from execution risk. What does that mean? So marketplaces sound simple. You're just a middleman, right? You connect supply and demand and you rake in the fees. Wrong. So you're not building one business, you're building two at the same time, and they have to grow together. The hard part wasn't writing code, not that I can write code, you can hire someone to do that. It was getting people on both sides to care at the same time, right? Caring is liquidity on both sides. And that's the execution risk involved. And we underestimated it badly. Second lesson, don't be 100% dependent on someone else's data. So we leaned on partnerships with store management systems to access inventory. So think like, what is the control point or the booking system or the CRM that the tour operator uses, the guy with the Dolphin Watch boat? And so it sped up things, but also locked us in because we had access to their calendars, but we were also dependent on those APIs. And so every decision was constrained by what someone else's software could or couldn't do. And one partner pulls the plug, we were using Fair Harbor, Resd, and Peak at the time, who were all very gracious to allow a company like a no-name company like us build with their APIs. We would have been toast, and we didn't own the underlying data. And I found that if you don't own the data, you don't own the outcome. Lesson 3, don't build everything at once. This one sounds so damn obvious in retrospect. So we went and tried to build a website, an iOS app, and an Android app before confirming product market fit. It took over a year to even start selling something. So looking back, it was like buying a tuxedo before getting asked to prom. Should have picked one platform, nailed it, and validated demand before pouring gasoline on the development fire, which costs a lot. Jet fuel costs a lot. Lesson 4, don't make everything dependent on code if you can't code. Wow, frustrating. So every bug, every pivot, every deadline, we felt helpless. I knew what we needed to be done. I could describe it, but I couldn't go and do it myself. It was almost like debilitating anxiety. And outsourcing to overseas dev shops, some were solid, others were glorified chop shops, if I'm being real. They sell you on the dream and they put people who can barely code behind it. And eventually I realized that you can't rent conviction, and you definitely shouldn't outsource your entire means of production. I could never get these people to care as much about my product roadmap and my dream for what it should become as I did. And I thought I could. Lesson 5, no one will invest if you won't quit your day job. So I'll be straight with you. We were hedging and investors could smell it. So if you're not willing to go all in, why would they? And I get it now. Capital, it will chase conviction, and conviction starts with like a ton of hours that you're not getting paid for, right? Like you have to be willing to go broke, which we were, but like we were not going broke on like our own calendars and giving those completely up to this dream. And I totally get that part now. I do. But at the same time, I wouldn't have had the money to get it off the ground. So it was a bit of a chicken and the egg, no pun intended, because we're talking about marketplaces here. A chicken and the egg problem there. Lesson 6, features are very expensive distractions. So every time things got hard, we'd build a new feature and it felt productive, right? What a trick. But it was just busy work in disguise. None of those features moved the needle because we hadn't nailed the core job to be done. We should have been out there just working on the product market fit and even connecting the two sides manually rather than trying to throw technology at these small problems. And so novelty is easy. The refinement of it is hard, but the refinement is what will print you the money at the end of the day. And it's not always pretty to get there. Lesson 7, you can be low frequency or low price as a marketplace, but you can absolutely not be both. So our average transaction was around $180, right? Two people, 2.5 tickets, actually, 2.5 tickets per order, 50, $60 per ticket. Not bad, right? But vacations don't happen every week. It was built for infrequent occurrences. So if you're not a habit and you're not a high ticket splurge, you're stuck in the dreaded middle, which is low lifetime value, high customer acquisition cost, which leaves you little wiggle room for mistakes. So an example of a low ticket size but high frequency would be DoorDash or Uber. An example of a extremely high ticket size but extremely low frequency would be like buying a house on Redfin. And we were like on neither side of those two spectrums. We were somewhere in like this dead zone in the middle. And now that I understand the unit economics of marketplaces better, like I look back on that and be like, huh, yeah, probably should have known that. Lesson 8, constraints drive focus. And this applies to all businesses. So we tried to launch inventory in 20 different states because remember, we had the API calls to all the inventory at all these different tour operators. And that was a massive mistake. So we didn't have the resources to support that kind of spread. Eventually, we did zoom all the way into Tampa, Florida. So we went all the way from US to East Coast to Southeast Coast to Florida and then to Tampa. So one beach town, one customer persona, and one set of playbooks. That's what we needed to get it off the ground. And we did have some sales there, which was cool. And it was funny how once we embraced our limitations, we finally started getting traction. And I talked to James Courier of NFX on the podcast about this. If you want to drive the Ferrari convertible, you have to wake up every day loving the skateboard. And sometimes you got to start simple with just a skateboard. So the skateboard to us was probably Dolphin Watch Tours in Tampa, Florida. Lesson 9, A founder's number one job is sales. So I wanted to hide behind a laptop and strategize, but strategy without distribution is just like it's like unpaid journaling. And so I had to make cold calls. I had to walk into surf shops and I had to pitch face to face. So I was walking up and down docks, shaking hands with people, sweating my ass off, telling the story of what we were trying to build. And like that is so scary. From a person who at the time I was working an FP&A job, Monday through Friday, and then I was out on docks, like I said, trying to sign up people who had like a fishing tour. And turns out everything in life is sales if you want to get to the top, even product, even fundraising, especially fundraising. And so sales, if you want to get to the top, you got to do sales. Lesson 10, killing your baby is really hard. So we dragged it out. We kept saying just one more quarter. Our efforts would kind of go down, diminish, but it wasn't working. And we knew it, but ending it felt like a failure. But it was also the moment we made space for the next chapter, right? So I actually started this newsletter as a part of that. So like I said, I was working at this startup doing FP&A and I was learning a lot there. And then I was doing this on nights and weekends. And so I was getting this MBA in business. I guess that's how much of my MBA costs, $209,000. 640. But yeah, so it was really hard to kill it off. But like it got me to the next spot in life. I eventually actually became a CFO because of it. Because when I interviewed, it was for a marketplace business. It was a vertical software marketplace business. Um, and they were like, "How do you know so much about like supply side liquidity? How do you know so much about the unit economics of a marketplace?" And it's like, well, because I tried to create one and I was using my own money. And so at the time, like I felt like a failure, but what I learned from it set me up to do things that I was passionate about and more uniquely qualified to excel in. So does losing over $200,000 hurt? Like, absolutely. That sucks. But it brought me something else. It brought me clarity, brought me courage. And I had less money, but I had a ton of hard-earned lessons. And so if you're sitting on your own big, scary idea, just know that even if it flops, it might still take you somewhere worth going. And if it scares you, this scared the shit out of me. And that's good because it means it matters and it means you care. So that's it for this week. That's the story of bubble booking and the marketplace business that I tried to start. We'll do more of these periodic deep dives on the business of mostly metrics, how I got here, and what I'm doing today. So thanks for riding with me. Oh, and if you can give this podcast 5 stars, that would mean so much to me. Thanks.